Now come the days of the king, and may they be blessed while the thrones of the Valar endure. Hey everyone, Yoiston here, and I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Middle-earth. My friends, we come to it at last, the final video in the Timeline of Arda series, which I began in August of 2017. This series has been my favorite, perhaps, of all the series I've done thus far on the channel, for it brings us from the very beginning of the Legendarium to the very end, tying it and all of the major themes and story moments all together. This is amazing, and I'm so fortunate and blessed to have been able to see this series through, and I thank you all for joining me for almost the 5 years it has taken to complete it. If you'd like to watch through this series from the beginning, the playlist is linked in the description and cards, along with some other related articles and videos. My friends, you all are amazing. Thank you so much for being here and joining me today. Let's begin our tale. Picking up in the early 2900s of the Third Age, where we left off last time, we see that the world of Middle-earth had been darkening over the last 600 years or so. Sauron and his servants had been regaining power, the White Council was faltering in their resolve, and the One Ring was held by the creature Gollum in the caves of the Misty Mountains, which could change the fate of Middle-earth for either side. But just as it often is in stories and in the real world, chance and fate, tied to the will to act, would change everything. After an unplanned meeting between Gandalf and Thorin Oakenshield, the heir of the Longbeards, in Bree, the two decided it was time to take back the lonely mountain of Erebor from the dragon Smaug. This had been on Gandalf's mind for some time, for Smaug and his position in the north was certainly an issue. So, in 2941, Gandalf and Thorin decided to take up this venture, and Gandalf would also take another chance by getting a hobbit involved in the great deeds of the world. Up to this point in the Timeline of Arda, the story of the hobbits had been a small footnote in the greater deeds of the world, but recent events had seen Gandalf believe that they were exactly what the wise needed to accomplish great things. He was right, of course, for the hobbit Bilbo Baggins joined Thorin's company. This quest of Erebor, especially its subsequent success, was actually quite a surprise to all parties in Middle-earth, even that of the Shadow, which had been slowly creeping in over the centuries. Concurrent with the quest, the White Council finally agreed to oust Sauron from Dol Guldur, even as Saruman's hand of treachery was being forced. Thus, the Necromancer was forced back to Mordor, likely earlier than he had designed, but I'm sure he felt like he had waited long enough for the West to weaken, while the death of Smaug and the defeat of the Orcs and Goblins of the North saw a major victory for the Free Peoples in the North. Thus, Bilbo returned home, the Dwarves returned to Erebor under King Dain Ironfoot, men rebuilt the Kingdom of Dale under King Bard, and the Free Peoples of Rhovanion and Eriador were made far stronger. Yet Sauron toiled as well, for in 2951 he declared himself openly in Mordor, and saw Dol Guldur reclaimed by his Nazgul. Even if he could not recover his One Ring, he could destroy the West in time through conquest, as there were none he deemed to be as strong as those in the Second Age were, to oppose him now. Speaking of the ring, he did not know that it was now in the hands of the Free Peoples, in Bilbo's keeping far to the west. At this time, Aragorn, son of Arathorn, and the descendant of the kings of Arnor, Gondor, Númenor, and even the distant descendant of the greatest fathers of men in the Edain, learned of his true heritage, and he went out into the wild. He would come to show Sauron that the strength of the Elder Days lived on. 2 years later, in 2953, the White Council would meet for the last time, and Saruman began realizing his plans of treachery all the more. Had the quest for Erebor and the ousting of Sauron from Dol Guldur not occurred, perhaps the realms of men in the east and south would have crushed Gondor in the end, like Angmar had crushed Arnor long before, and then Sauron could focus on retrieving his ring and defeating all others. But now he was forced to rebuild a fraction of the power he held at the end of the Second Age, and he would do just that, taking decades to do so. Things were set in motion now that could not be undone. Aragorn would go forth and aid Rohan and Gondor in finding victory in their battles, and he became learned, wise, strong, and valiant in his years abroad, becoming greater than many of his ancestors since the time of Elendil and the great Númenorian kings before the downfall. While the West would still see some sorrow, such as in the failure of Balin's company, or the treachery of Saruman over the years, the board was being set and the pieces were moving. In the early 3000s, Gollum would be captured by both Sauron's servants and by Aragorn himself, and information concerning the One Ring would come out. Sauron prepared his armies for battle, and in 3018 he began the War of the Ring, which would be the final named war in the Legendarium, for either the Shadow would prevail, or all would be ended. He began with attacking Osgiliath, and some months later, his servants in Dol Guldur and from out of the east would make war with Erebor, Dale, Mirkwood, and Lothlorien in the north. All the while, the Nazgul searched for the Shire and the One Ring, but of course Gandalf and the others were not inactive. Gandalf learned all he could of the ring, and helped Frodo, Bilbo's heir and the new ring-bearer, set off on his adventure. Saruman would betray the West, causing many issues for Gandalf and Rohan. The Fellowship of the Ring would be formed in Rivendell, and in the Misty Mountains, Gandalf and Durin's Bane would meet their ends at the hands of one another, even as the ring made its way east and south. The Fellowship would break, and some members would come to Rohan, even as Gandalf, who returned from death as Gandalf the White, aided some of the members of the Fellowship of the Ring in stopping Saruman and saving Rohan from its weakened state. All the while, Frodo, with Sauron's ring, and his companion Sam would encounter Gollum, who aided them during their adventures. Gondor was on the brink of collapse, and as the Ring-Bearer made his way closer to Mordor, coming into conflict with Shelob, the spawn of Ungoliant from the Elder Days, Gandalf, Aragorn, Rohan, and many others saved Gondor as well. Even though many things were happening that surprised and beat Sauron back, both the Lieutenant of Morgoth and the Free Peoples knew it was only a matter of time before he won in the end, unless the One Ring could be destroyed. In a last gambit, the Battle of the Black Gate, even while the Siege of Erebor happened in the north, the hopes of the West came down to this diversion to give Frodo enough time to destroy the One Ring. And in the end it would be destroyed, but once more, by chance and fate, as it would be Gollum who took the ring and fell into the fires of Mount Doom, ending not only the plan of taking Middle-earth through the rings of power that Sauron had made in the Second Age, but ending also the last true remnant of Morgoth's treachery from the Elder Days. Middle-earth was restored, even as the Shadow ended. The hobbits were heralded as heroes by those who survived, and they were seen to be as great as the heroes from the ancient days of the world, heroes we discussed in this very timeline. The fating of the kings was reversed, as Aragorn became King Elisar. The kingdoms of Arnor and Gondor, the kingdoms of the Men of the West, would be restored under King Elisar, and a sapling of a new white tree would be found and planted. The lines of Elros and Elrond were met once again in the marriage of Aragorn and Arwen. The works of Sauron, such as Dol Guldur, would be utterly destroyed. The hobbits would return home and end the threat of the fallen Maya Saruman, saving their shire as well. And so it was with that, with the final end of Sauron and his works. The Third Age swiftly came to its end soon after. With it, the time of the elves was ending, and since this timeline and the greater scope of Tolkien primarily followed the days of the elves, the end of Tolkien's timeline was near at hand. The destruction of the One Ring made the remaining rings of power fade, and the time came for their bearers to return to the West. Just as many of their ancestors, or even some of them themselves, had once left Valinor in exile. The remaining bearers of the One Ring would be offered places in the uttermost West as well, all of which would eventually be accepted. Many years before, the elves were exiled in the pursuit of Morgoth and his evils, in the hopes that they could one day defeat them and rule their own realms. These hopes were then accomplished, as Morgoth, Sauron, and their darkness had been defeated, although the marring and scars upon Arda would never fully heal. Many realms of the Eldar had risen and fallen over the ages, and it was time to pass the world of Middle-earth into the hands of men. So it was that most of the elves, Gandalf, and some others passed into the West in the late Third Age and early Fourth Age. Middle-earth was come into its later years. King Elisar and Queen Arwen Undolmiel saw the restoration of Arnor and Gondor, and King Elisar and King Eomer of Rohan had war and eventual peace with men in the east and south. The dwarves reclaimed their kingdom of Khazad-dûm at long last, and hobbits had peace in their newly expanded shire. It seems that eventually hobbits would disappear from the world of men, becoming too hard to locate and find in their stealthy nature, and sometime after the coming of Durin VII, the dwarves would disappear from this world into their homes. The greatest tales of Middle-earth were written in the Red Book of Westmarch, and a copy of it came to Gondor and thus made its way into the world of men, our world, and a certain professor made sure that the world saw it. While the story of the New Shadow would not be made canon, it is possible for one to say that another evil would rise in the early Fourth Age. If one regards it as canon, we may also say that the Dagor Daggerath, the final battle, and the second music of the Ainur have yet to come as well, of which we all shall be included. But we dwell now here in our world, the days of the elves and Valar, long since past, but not lost, never lost. Yet even now we may look to the evening star, and see the light of Eärendil's Silmaril, keeping us safe from the shadow of Morgoth in the void. Although Tolkien's world is just a story, it is a powerful one, a fictional telling of history, a mythology to brighten our world, and to give us comfort and hope, even when nothing seems certain. And so we come to the end of our story and the Timeline of Arda. From this tale we see that chance, fate, and free will can all coincide to defeat even the darkest of days and bring us into a better and brighter day. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed not only this video, but all of our Timeline of Arda series. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and share this with a friend, and let me know your favorite part of the timeline in the comments below. For me, I grew up with The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, even before I got deeper into the lore and Legendarium at large. But even when I explored and learned more about all of the earlier days within Middle-earth, I fell in love with all of it. I'll be honest, I don't think I can choose a favorite part of the timeline, as it's all really connected, so I won't blame you if you can't either. Thank you all again for watching, and please check out our full Timeline of Arda series if you haven't yet. I'm so proud of what we've accomplished here on this channel with the timeline, and it means the world to me that you have all taken the time to be here with me through the series. Thanks to our Valar tier patrons, Adrian de la Tour, Chris Ortner, Kyle Wetzel, Peter Shepard, Jonathan Putnam, Mark Kralik, Blair Scott, Merton, John Hume, Sam McBee, Matt Sabatch, Elizabeth Calvert, Maz Gibbs, Ben Gardner, Kondar, Reese Jenkins, Adam Petrolik, Kuzan, Brandon Glidden, Molly Sullivan, Daniel Burns, Anthony Harmon, and Dorwin Gray. Thank you so much, and thanks to all of our patrons and YouTube members. The support means the world to me. Please subscribe and hit that bell button to join the Men of the West and all of the Free Peoples today, and I'll see you all again next Sunday with a video on the 5 most powerful weapons in Middle-earth. My friends, you are all the best. Thank you so much for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one.